Hey Crafty friends, Wen's here from Crafty Kiwi Mama. Wanted to just show you a couple of things I've been working on. We have a gorgeous tag die at Whimsy Stamps that's in our sale page. If it hasn't sold out already, it will be very soon. And so I've been looking through my stash, thinking about what other shapes I had that I could work with. And we had another item that was in the sales page, which has sold out since I created these. But I'm still going to show you because they're gorgeous. And it's a shame that they've sold out before I got to share it. However, it was a cool idea to work with. These were the Whimsy Stamps stained glass window die set, and so this is now sold out. I couldn't find it on the website when I was just looking. It was there a few days ago when I was creating these, but I've turned their, I think, let's have a look which size it is. It's the fourth, it's the middle one, fourth from smallest, fourth from largest, so it's the very central size. So if you have this in your stash from Whimsy Stamps, this is a fun way to turn this essentially layering die set into tags. And I think they came out super cute. I've done an image of a little deer which comes from the Christmas deer set, illustrated by our amazing artist Chrissy Armstrong. And I've used some of the newer ticket stamp sets. I think this one's called Christmas Tickets. I'll have to look that up, or I'll put it in the description box below with all those details for you. But I've used just VersaFine. I think this one's actually Acorn, not Pinecone. It's not as dark as Pinecone. It's a slightly richer colour from VersaFine Clear. And I stamped the little image also in that same ink. So I wasn't then able to use Copic markers to colour this because the ink isn't compatible with alcohol colouring medium. So what I've done is actually coloured it with colour pencils and then used Gamsol to smooth out the lines. And then, as you can see, added a little bit of white highlight on the nose. The white on the body and the eyes is actually done with white pencil. Those were my Prismacolor pencils, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, so I won't fish those out to show you. But I did them essentially for the same, apart from this little one that I gave him a little gold jingle bell at his neck, but otherwise 4 really cute little images using what is essentially a layering die set as a tag die. And so what I've done is punched a hole in the top, and I've used my crocodile. Many of you will have this and be familiar with it. I'll open it out so you know what I'm talking about. From We Are Memory Keepers. This crocodile set comes with quite a number of little eyelets, and I just fill up the chambers when I run out and redo them. So I had the eyelets in a few different colours. These ones I've used were a brassy colour, and I've matched it with a really fun thick Hessian twine, and then put the lighter, this is Spellbinders from Vivant, really thin silver twine just to finish it off and make it look cute. So that was my first set of 4 that I did. I then followed up the design. I pulled out the same set and die cut. And what I'm encouraging you to do here is, because sadly this set is now sold out, but is to think about your layering dies in a different way so that you can use them as tags. And I've done a very similar thing here. You can see on this one I've done it with a white eyelet using my crocodile, and then stamped from, I think, the same set as the Sleigh Rides sentiment from this one came from. You can see those two belong on the same tag stamp set. I'm pretty sure that's the Christmas Tickets stamp set. And I've used a VersaFine Strawberry, VersaFine Clear Strawberry, to stamp this down. So it's a lovely sort of, I don't know, slightly more pinky red, but it's really lovely on white. And then again, because I had stamped this one in VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, without thinking, because I just wanted to get a good stamped impression, I then again couldn't Copic colour this little character. So I've used my Prismacolor pencils and Gamsol again just to smooth out the lines. And I did these little characters. I've done 2 blonde, one a slightly more straw blonde and a brighter blonde, one a brunette, and one with black hair. Just for a bit of fun and a bit of difference, but there's not a lot between them. You know, like it's a very similar design. I've just added a bit of red organza ribbon with a beautiful satin finish on the edges, and some black very fine twine. This is actually May Arts black twine, which Simon Says Stamp stocks in a big roll. I'll show you another day. And then these are just little bells that I had in my stash. These ones you might recognize if you're a Lint fan. These were collected from our lint bunnies. Just collected up to be used again, and I've got another little one floating around on my desk somewhere. So just a fun way to use little accessories like that. I'm always keeping things that I know could have a second life. And then I have this little set. I'll show you the ones that I haven't finished yet. So I've got 2 behind that I haven't finished the Santas on. You could actually just leave it like that and have the Santa without any colouring. It looks fine. It's more of a graphic design. And I've chosen to add beautiful pink organza ribbon. And then this beautiful sparkly iridescent twine is from Simon Says Stamp, and it's their own quite recent iridescent twine. Very thin twine, and it's lovely to work with and doesn't fray too badly on the ends either, which I was really thrilled about. And then I've got this little cutie which I did colour up. The Santa image is from a newer one by Chrissy Armstrong. I think this past month, I think it was released in October, in our October release. If not, it was a November release, but an early one. Just such gorgeous little characters, and they're just little headshots. So that one and the little elf. I can't remember the name of the set, but again, I'll link it in the description box below with all the details. But this little character, knowing that I had made the mistake of using VersaFine Clear for that one and having to pencil colour, because pencil colouring is not my strength, so that's why I sort of hesitate when I talk about this. It looks fine and it's okay, but I love Copic colouring, and you can see the difference in vibrancy between those two. I really do prefer the depth of colour that you get with Copic markers or alcohol markers, whatever your preference is. I'm a Copic girl, but before that I used to use Pro markers, which were also alcohol inks, and I use them every now and again. I've got them scattered around my craft room, so whichever is your alcohol markers of choice, they just come up with such a vibrant, lovely kind of depth of colour, and I think that the little Santa looks beyond adorable on this. I went for pink just to have something different in the mix, because obviously I've got 3 sets of colours with these. I've got the little deer that came out in the more rustic finish, and then the white with the red I thought was really gorgeous for that little character. I could have equally done, like that could have been a Santa, which could have looked super cute as well, but I chose to do the Santa on the pink. So I was showing you here, the reason I haven't glued this down yet was to actually show you the progression between those 3 stages of the tag. This is where I've stamped the image where I want it to be on the design, and then I have coloured and fussy cut this little character, who I then will stick straight down following where those design edges are. And sometimes when you fussy cut, you can cut a little bit off more than you intended and you lose definition from your lines, etc., etc. So I decided to stamp it down underneath so that if I did that, and you can see on this little character, the beard, there's like a line underneath there. That's from the stamp underneath, bringing back that definition, and I think I've cut a bit too far off there. So you don't lose any of the lines because it's stamped on the base panel, and then obviously you glue it on top and it covers over the black and white lines. But if you have got cut a little too close to your design, the stamping underneath keeps the stamp lines for you really clearly, and I like that approach. I think it works really well. So I will glue that little guy down. I just wanted to show you that process, and these 2 I've yet to complete, but I thought they were far enough through the process to show you that particular set. So that was my first 3 using that particular frame set. As I said, these are now retired, so I'm really sorry, that's a mean tease. I was hoping I was going to be saying grab them while you can. They're super cheap, because they were. They're a lovely, lovely set. Brilliant stained glass sort of design. They remind me of cathedral windows, and I've used them a lot in the past, including for Halloween makes. So if you've got it, remember to use it. So we'll set that one aside because we're not going to come back and revisit that again. And I'll stick these out of my way now that we've worked with them. And I'll show you the next little set of tags that I created using this layering set. So this is one of our mix and match marquee die sets, which is a really cool kind of funky retro mod design. You can see I've got a couple missing, and that's just because I've used them on another project and forgotten to put them back again. I will remedy that later. But I decided that this one would be really fun to do a tag design with this little layer of the set, and I have done a similar thing to what I did with the other 3, where I grabbed the same papers. I did them at the same time, but I just cut different shapes, and I've used that tag and put my hole for the tag design up in that sort of more the highest corner, so to speak. But when I stamped it, I decided, because obviously it die cuts that way, I decided that I would put the sentiment just across the base. And the nice thing about these tags, they're super quick. And you can write your message to the recipient on the back, and you can see my little eyelets punched through all the way through. I've done 2 of these with red and white baker's twine, which I've got lots of in my stash, using the same Merry Christmas and Happy New Year sentiment, which again is from one of the ticket stamp sets. There are 2 Christmas ticket stamp sets. I have both of them and I adore them both. They're really lovely. One has like a Polar Express theme, and the other has the Merry Christmas, the candy cane, and the old-fashioned sleigh rides. They're all from one set, plus there's one more, which I don't think I've used, but is rather gorgeous. Oh, I have used it, it's here. So all 4 of those were done that way, and these last 2 I had some really lovely gingham ribbon, so I've used gingham. So they could look good either way. I just wanted to show you some options. So I've done 2 with the red and white baker's twine and 2 with the red and white gingham. This red and white gingham is one of my favourite things in the whole wide world. I have it all over my house. I have tablecloths in red and white gingham and tea towels in red and white gingham. I have an apron in red and white gingham. I love that very, very much. It reminds me of little cafes in Paris. I grew up there when I was a little girl, so I have a soft spot for red and white gingham in my heart. Also reminds me a lot of Scandinavia. So love that. Just thought I'd tell you that little side story. And then coming back to the other tags that I created, these ones were done with craft cardstock. This isn't Nina Desert Storm. It's a slightly thicker one. I've got some Nina 80 pound, but it wasn't quite thick enough to use for this. Nina's a really lovely tone of craft cardstock, but this worked equally well. And I've done a similar thing to the craft cardstock one I did there by using the bronzy eyelets to fill the holes. You could just use, Whimsy Stamps has a couple of die sets that has reinforcers, I think they call them, in the die sets, but I've just used eyelets because I had them and it was easy and it was so quick to do. And if I don't use them, they just sit and go to waste in my stash, so that seems silly to me. So I thought these were cute. They say made with love, always fresh gingerbread bakery, bread, cookies, cupcakes, cakes. So just really simply 4 little festive looking little tags that you can then write your recipient's message on the back for. And just a quick twist, this is slightly heavier, denser, I want to say coarser twine. It's not as soft as the other one that I had. This one's a thicker twine, but see how it's kind of soft and curly? This one's a very stiff one, but they both work perfectly well. So that was the next lot. And then this last set, I've used Believe in the Magic of Christmas, and I think this one comes from the same set as the Polar Express ones. And then that little set, I used pink eyelets to just reinforce the holes that I punched in the top corners, but that's that same little die for all of those sets, and just used with a different approach. I've done pink with black, so that I've used the May Arts very fine black twine and then the lovely iridescent twine from Simon Says Stamp to complete that design. In fact, every single one of those ones that I've done, I've used the Whimsy Stamps Christmas ticket stamp sets. So yeah, that's where I got to with that. And then now, as you're with me, I thought I would do a couple of designs using another of my layering die sets. I have this one, which is the Retro Mod die set. How cool would that be as a tag, right? With a hole punched in any one of those corners. You decide where you want it to be, whether you want it to be horizontal or vertical, depending on your stamping. And we could have some fun turning this particular layering frame set into tags. So that was one idea I have. I also looked at this set here, which is the baking die set from Whimsy Stamps. I love this die set. I think this is so innovative and has such a clever mix of elements, and the one I think will make a really fun tag is, of course, the breadboard. How cool is that? It's already got a little eyelet cut into it, so that job's already done. And we can put stamping on this whichever way, horizontal or vertical, you know. So I'm going to take a few minutes now to cut a few of each of these, and then we're going to move into doing some stamping and some tag creating with those. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, I've cut some slivers of paper and they're 2 inches across because I worked out that this die set was a 2 inch across die set. I've just realised my mistake that I didn't actually do any wider ones for this because that's not wide enough, I don't think. Oh, it might just be. Look at that. Well, that was grace and meant to be. What I want to encourage you to do is shop your stash, have a look at what you've got in your stash and bring out your layering dies and just look at what the smaller layers are like as to whether they would be appropriate to be used this way. And I think you'll find you've actually got quite a number of different cool tag possibilities in your stash already. So we're going to take this and die cut. I'll just show one on film, but I will be doing the rest of them off camera. Okay, so I'm moving on to doing the shape that is the chopping board, and I figured out that I had just enough margin to do it this way, so fingers crossed all the little curly edges and things will be in line properly. Sorry about that big noise. My die cutter it does make some pops and spits every now and again. Okay, so we just got that in, which was good. You can see it just fit on that side, slightly wider border, but it just fit in that frame. There's definitely a nice clean cut on all edges. So how cute is that? That's going to make an awesome tag. And as I said, it's already got the little eyelet hole cut out. So that's actually kind of ready to use as a tag. It's a brilliant idea, if I do say so myself. So we're going to do 3 more of those, but I won't put you through watching all of that. We'll skip ahead very quickly. Okay, so I'm back with a couple of supplies. I've pulled out some of my background stamps, some of the favourite ones that I enjoy. I've got the chippy paint background, the farmhouse shiplap background, the burlap background. Then I've got the messy mesh background, which is another fantastic one for just adding texture. Or the brushed stripes background, which is a brilliant one for Christmas. And I believe Chrissy Armstrong was the designer of this particular set. They're usually done by Denise Lynn and Deb Davis, these background stamps, but I think this one was done by Chrissy Armstrong, and it's just a really fun one for Christmas with some sort of jaggedy edges. They're not straight lines, they're a little bit quirky and fun. I hope that's showing without too much shine on it. Sorry, I can't actually see the image when I'm filming, it's above me. But that one's brilliant. You can stamp it as red stripes on white, or white heat emboss on red cardstock, or green on white, or you know, so many different possibilities. I've pulled out some inks. I've got the VersaFine Clear Sand Dune, which I think I will use to do the texture on the boards, because at the moment they're just white, to really make it look like a wooden chopping board, which is what I would like to do. I think using this one, the shiplap, farmhouse shiplap background, will add some fun texture onto that. Okie dokie. And I'm pretty sure we're going to go for I want a lighter ink. So I'm going to go for this one, which is the sand dune that we talked about earlier. I could have done it in a darker colour, but that would look better if I had started with a craft base colour. For this particular one, it's going to look good if we do it with, I think, the paler colour, and then we can use a darker ink on top. So that's my plan. These rubber stamps, what's moving on the table is my slippery mat, not the stamp itself. It's actually quite well stuck to the surface that I've put it on, because I've removed the protective backing. I always keep my protective backing, so the minute I've cleaned the stamp, this backing goes back on to protect the integrity of the sort of sticky foam that's on the back of it, and I find it works incredibly well. So we are just going to decide which way I want my design to go, and we're just going to pop that down and use our fingers to try and get into all the nooks and crannies on the stamp. It doesn't matter if you get a little bit of colour on the back. That's number 1, okay, with the board going that way, which I really like. So I'm going to do it for number 2 as well. You can kind of see where I hit the ink pad, where the ink is still shiny versus where it's been lifted and is now looking dull. That should be pretty good, kind of working your fingers along the design to just, and then holding it flat so you don't skid around. See how I anchored it with my hand but lifted it at the top? That meant that nothing was going to smudge on the design. That's number 2 done. We've got a bit of shiny ink up the top here, so I'm going to invert it and do it the other way around. And then bring that down. Should still be plenty of ink in those places. And I could have actually layered all 4 on here, but I don't know that they fit 100%, so I've just done it the way that I've done it. But that's come up nicely, and then we've got one more, and I can see wet ink here, but I'm not at this point 100% sure that I've got the coverage I need, so I'm just going to whack a bit more ink up there. And for this one, I'm going to do it lengthways, just to show you something different. Okay, so we're going to lay this one down. As soon as you get it to make contact with the base, that's it, you don't move it. It's now in place, and whatever the result is and images you get, okay? In Tim Holt's words, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Doesn't that look cool? So either way, that base rubber stamp is the business for adding a bit of texture to your designs. And we can come in and add a little bit of edging with some distress ink around the edges just to sort of create like a vignette effect so that the centre of the board is lighter, or ink it all the way across if that's what we want to do. But I'm going to do the other stamping first before I do any edge stamping. And that's actually, surprisingly, that paper is really absorbent. This is just... I use Hammermill 100 for my thicker things, and for the tags I've used 100ml. I use 80 when I'm doing my Copic colouring because my printer won't take the 100. But both work really well. 80 is more of a layering weight. This is a good like card base weight, a denser weight. So here's our stamp. We're going to pull the backing off. This is not a new one. It's a very old one and I've used it many, many times. I think the strawberry ink's going to be the go for that. And I just need to die cut from one of my masking papers. I'm back with you again, ready for the next phase of things. My battery ran out. So while that was having a quick charge, I'd forgotten we had spare batteries, and hubby's come and rescued the day by pulling out the spare batteries. But I did stamp using the background stamp that I showed you before, the backgrounds for these. I did my experimentation with the ticket masked off area. I've cut it backed with some just wax paper so that the sticky part of the ticket would remain sticky, or not ticket but the masking paper would retain its sticky back, because you know sometimes you get those like feathery bits of damaged area on your cutting plates if you don't back your non-stick stuff with something, like it's one of those ones that's on a roll, so it doesn't have the paper built into it to protect the sticky side of it. So I just backed it onto some greaseproof paper basically. And what I found was with these, even with my very careful pushing down of the stamp and the fact that I used a very thin masking paper, this is mint tape from scrapbook.com, and it's very thin, so it should mask really well, but just the nature of it and the fact that I was pushing my fingers around to get a good seal on the stamp. You can see I've muffed that one slightly because I moved it when I was picking it up, which is what I was talking about avoiding doing before. So there you go, I've made all the mistakes today so that you don't have to. But the point about that is the ink didn't, even though it was a really thin masking tape, it didn't go right up to the edges as I hoped it would, so it's left a less than beautiful edge for us. So what I'm thinking I will do is just come back in and do what we talked about doing initially, which is actually just put a layer of ticket dye over the top. I need to go away and die cut them from paper that matches this. This is a different paper that's a little bit more creamy, off-white sort of look. This is a the hammer mill is a nice kind of warm white. So I need to redo that. So the two that I tried masking were an epic fail, but we can pivot and we can just put a ticket on top. It won't be perfect, but it will be okay and good enough. So much so that I bit the bullet and put in the eyelets. I've chosen black because I think that the red and the black will be really striking, and these were the ones we talked about using the train, the Polar Express stamp on. So that's going to be where we stamp this, and that will be basically the end of that little design. But I did, because of the candy stripe I thought looked so cool with these two, I'm going to do the candy cane stamp. So I'm going to stamp two with the candy canes ticket stamp and two with the Polar Express ticket stamp, and you can see the difference between these two. The ones where I tried to mask it and that was an epic fail. Don't do that, it didn't work. I don't know why it failed particularly. If I'd done it in a misty, it might have worked better, because I could have really put the pressure around the masked area, but it didn't work with what I was doing at freehand over the big stamp that I was using, over the rubber stamp. So I've pivoted and I've gone and stamped the full pattern onto these two, which you can see looks fantastic. It's a really fun design for a candy cane stripe. And in the meantime, I have inked up my little breadboards. So they started off like this, which you'll remember I did the shiplap design on, and I've turned them into that, just with a bit of ink. Remember I talked about inking the edges? So because this had plenty of time to dry, in between the VersaFine clear ink taking a little bit longer, I've gone and taken those three and turned them into slightly more breadboard looking things. What I had to hand was tea dye, so that's what I'm using. So it's a little bit more orangey and a bit warmer. Kind of works with our gingerbread theme that we're going to use for that. So I've got the one that says Gingerbread Bakery, which I will do on two of them. And then because I wanted to use that stamp that I'd yet to use on any of the others, I've got the one that says Merry Christmas in these ones. They're a little bit wide that way, but work perfectly that way. So we're going to stamp them as if it's horizontal and have it on the present coming from that direction. So handle that end, which we'll put the ribbons and things on. So you can watch me ink that one up, tea dye. These are just cheapy ones that I bought from Amazon a while back that were colour coded before Whimsy brought out their ink blending brushes. So I sort of use these as my backup ones exclusively for dye ink. And sorry. Notice how my brain switches off the minute I'm trying to do the action and I can't talk at the same time. I think multitasking. Complete fallacy. We can do 10 things badly or one thing well. So I'm just putting a deeper bit of colour around the edges, and then I'm taking what I've got on my brush or what I've got on my mat here and just dragging it across the middle to bring that colour right across. And it doesn't obscure or, defeat the fact that we'd put on the cool stamping. You can still see that it's part of the design, so it genuinely looks like a wooden slat board. Whoops, nearly dropped it in the ink pad. And that's going to look really cool with a few sort of raffia ribbons up the top. And once our stamping's done on, as I said, we'll do it that way so that it fits on. And I think it's going to look pretty cool. So we're moving on to the next phase. So if I didn't say already, Distress Ink was tea dye. Done with my dye ink brush. And we'll move on to stage number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know where we're at with stages. We've done quite a few now, but we'll just give that a quick tidy up. You can see I've cleaned my red ink off the rubber mat while my camera battery was charging. So we're just up to the next phase now. I'm going to take this off, and I think because we're now up to stamping and we'll be using the Misty, I can probably get rid of my mat. So bear with me a second while I just do that. Clean my fingers off a little bit. So let's bring our Misty back in. And this set here doesn't need to have the tickets over top. It can just be stamped directly on it. So we'll do those first. And I've already pulled off the ones that I want to use on that. So those ones were going to be 2 as the gingerbread option and 2 as the Merry Christmas option, which I think will look lovely. And I think we might go with the gingerbread. I want to do it in like a nice deep brown. I think I have left my pine cone. I'm not sure whether I want to do it in pine cone or acorn. I think the acorn will be dark enough but also rich enough to really bring that up nicely. So I think we might go for that option. This is going to be a little bit tricky to get into the corner for the stamping quite as I want it. Usually I would use my corner stamper like that to get it to sit right, but we might just wedge it in like that and then stick this one on the edge so it doesn't move. And then this one we're going to pick up with the Misty Door. Just make sure that I've got it relatively centered, sort of up and down as well as side to side. And I think we can go back that way a little bit and down a little bit, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to pick that up with my Misty Door. That should be just enough. And then we just need to tuck that back down into the corner because it lifted out of its seat. And I'm going to go and grab the, well, I'll grab both. I think acorn's the one I'm going to use, but I'll grab the pine cone as well. Sometimes the acorn may not be quite deep enough, so we'll try both. I'm talking about these VersaFine Clear. There's acorn and there's pine cone, and we'll just do like a little swatch test to see if we can see what the colour variance is between the two. So we've got, oh, it's quite a nice rich brown. It's a real sort of, I would have called that, yeah, like a conker brown. Acorn's a good choice, I guess, as the name. And then the pine cone I find a little bit darker and sometimes sort of too dark. It almost black. See the difference between those two? So this one, it will dry back a little bit, but if we want to get a nice warm tone, I think the acorn is the better one to do. So we're going to do that. That was me swatching something else earlier. So just grab that bit of paper. So we're going to stick with the acorn and get our gingerbread stamp all inked up. I'll lift it so you can see what I'm doing on the door there. Hopefully just on an angle there you can. Or maybe not quite, but sort of. You know what I mean. And then we're going to just line that up. Give it a press. I like using my press tool for nice even pressure. And I love that this one has the square, more squared off edges. Ugh, perfect. But the D, E and O seem to be just a little bit lighter on that, so we're going to do it one more time. Sometimes I can get away with just one stamping with this ink because it is very, I don't know what it is about it, but this particular formula for this stays wet a little bit longer and is really lovely for heat embossing. It's also stamps better for sentiments than any other ink I know. And if you don't believe me, go and watch Heidi Crowell do her, from Simon Says Stamp, do her lives. She talks about loving VersaFine ink too for exactly that reason. It stamps to perfection for things like sentiments. When you want a really fine stamp, it's just fantastic. So there's our first one, made with love, fresh always gingerbread. And that's that done with it. I'll add a few little feathery bits across the top. And yeah, just a bit of texture that shows that it's a breadboard and a bit of fun. I could have possibly, now that I look at that with the ink over the top, could have gone a little bit darker with our breadboard choice of colour. But I'm not unhappy with that. I think that worked out fine. That was the very pale one. We possibly could have gone one shade darker, but I don't know. I don't know whether we would have done that or not. Well, so let's do one more with the gingerbread. Stamp that down. Give it a good press with our press tool, and hopefully this time, because that's well inked up now, it should only need one pass. No, it needs a little bit more around the top. Just those top ones for some reason. Pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay, I think that looks good. And now we're going to pivot and put the other stamp in. So we've got two that are now the gingerbread, which I'll put up here just so you can see them in frame. And we're going to do these two, the last two that I have there, ready to go. We're going to switch over and do them as the, sorry, I have to think for a second, candy canes in red or on the red one, and then the Polar Express is going to be in black on the red. So this one is the one that we're doing for the second two of this. So we've got two that are the gingerbread, and the only reason I'm doing the swap out here, because actually all 4 could have been done as the gingerbread and it would look absolutely fantastic because they're boards and it would be brilliant for that. But I've already done that on my previous tags several times, use that particular gingerbread stamp. So I think it's fun to just change it up and do something a bit different. So I'm just going to swap that out and put on here now the Christmas one. Now I haven't actually seasoned this. I'm going to take a second just to run my hand across it for those of you that don't know about seasoning stamps. These particular stamps, the photopolymer ones, I'm sorry if I'm making the videoing go wobbly from knocking the table. They just require a little bit of lifting of the manufacturing oils and things off the front. And I've said this before in a previous life. It goes a little bit cloudy. You know why it's cloudy? It's the skin cells from your hand. But they put a little coating on there that means none of that oil that's from the residue of the manufacturing process is going to resist the ink. The ink will now take that really well. It's a little bit gross that it's your skin cells, but you know what I mean. It's fine. And I'm going to put that now into the misty and get that all lined up nicely. I think that's going to look fantastic. And I like that. I think that's dark enough. So we're going to stick with, I was just toying just then, having a thought about whether I would switch to the pine cone and do a darker one. But I love the depth of colour, but it's got that warmth to it. The VersaFine Acorn ink does. So I think we're going to stick with that colour. And we're just going to do 2 in that colour and see how that looks. So I've stuck with a brown kind of theme with these ones just because I really wanted it to have some warmth and feel like something that's fresh out of the kitchen, particularly the gingerbread ones. Now that only needs 1 stamping. That was perfect. And then our last one, which is the only one that I've done with the long tracks going the length of the wood panel, and that was just to show a different way to do it. So either way would work with that shiplap background stamp. And so taking a second now just to press that down, and I'll bring in my press tool to give it nice even pressure. This way you make sure that every little bit gets the attention it needs. Sometimes when you do it with your fingers you can miss bits, and I think that's why I particularly like that press tool. So again, 1 stamping was sufficient, and I think that looks fantastic. So that's our first 4 done, and I will finish these probably off camera because you don't want to watch me cutting little bits of twine and fussing around getting the little twirly bits around the heads of the tickets. The fun bit is to watch the actual ticket design come together, and I think these are super cute. So those are still a little bit wet. Usually I will sit them just to dry out a little bit. So we'll stick them over here without overlapping the stamping just to really give it time to air dry. And those 4 are done. So now we'll bring in our other tickets. Okay friends, I am back with the little ticket dies that I was talking about. I'll put that one over here because that's a slightly heavier weight cardstock. And then you can see these ones I've cut from, I did these from 80 pound hammer mill. These are the tiny little shapes that work with the smaller stamps in the set. I'll bring one over and show you what I'm talking about. So if you were actually using the frame, which I have here, the die cut frame. Sorry, I sent that through a really tight sandwich and it's bowed a little, but it'll come right. These little ones are what you sit those designs on. So all of those work really well on these smaller ticket shapes. So there's some really cool options there. So that's what those little ones are, which come in the actual ticket frame. This is the plainer one. There's also one that has stitching, and they're kind of interchangeable size-wise, but just really, really cool dies. I like them a lot. Very fun innovation of Whimsy's very recently, during Halloween, actually. I should remember. And I didn't want to put this back through. I could have quite easily just put this back through for another pass. I'd done the sandwich a little bit tight and I was worried about damaging the frame, so I didn't send it back through again after it. I only sent it through once, realising I was making it turn a funny shape. So I'm just going to trim that out because those two were on an edge that wasn't meeting very well. So now we've got our 4 tag shapes. Perfect for what we're going to do next. We're going to take our last 2 stamps and put them in the corner here. Now these 2, the candy canes I've done, but I haven't done this one. The Polar Express needs seasoning, so we're just going to do that on the door. Just run your hand across it. As I said, this just removes the residue from the manufacturing process and just makes sure that your stamp will take the ink properly. And that is all I do. It's such an easy process. I know there's people out there that recommend you buy rubber erasers and things like that to do the job for you. Honestly, you don't need it. That it works really well just with your hand. There is no need to buy extra fancy paraphernalia for that kind of thing. I think sometimes we're fed too many ideas and it's just not necessary. Right, so we want that to go that way, and I think I can just get the edge down with the magnet but still get that lined up really nicely. That's so cool. That's going to look amazing. And then my idea with that one is having the black eyelets on the top, which you can see I've done with those. I'll put the nicely stamped ones on top so you see what I mean. We're going to pick that up, but this time, instead of using a red ink like we've done for the background, we're going to pivot and go for our black VersaFine Nocturne ink. That one there, which is the Simon Says stamp one. They have their own version. It's still Sukineko, who are the manufacturers of this, but it's branded for Simon Says stamp. And actually really nice. It's the same packet, but just the orientation's been turned. You can see the difference. These ones are the ones that are straight from Sukineko, and this one, which is Simon Says stamp branded, has got the branding that way around. Okay, let's use our stamp tool to get the even pressure, and then hopefully one pass will be enough. I'm not sure if I want to stamp that a second time because it's got the most beautiful detailing that if I stamp it a second time I risk losing some of those lovely details, so I'm going to leave it there. The next one may stamp a little bit better because that's obviously the first stamping that's had. It's a new stamp. I haven't used it before. But look how cool that is. That's our design. How cool is that? And then I'll put some of the black raffia like I did on... Oh, where's the one I had the black on? I'll just show you quickly. I can see them in a little pile here. This one's got the black. So I've stamped it in black and then used the black May Arts twine. That'll look really cool on that. And I may even use that sparkly twine too. I think that'll look fabulous. So we've got some options. It'll be fun. So I'm just sandwiching that carefully in between there, keeping my stamp in the same place on the door, knowing that it's just going to hit that corner really nicely. And then hopefully this one will only need one pass as well, because we're literally giving it its second pressing. I'm hoping my magnet's not too close. I can see that's kind of right up against the edge of the stamp, so I might have pushed that one in too far. Let's see. Nope, perfect. Perfect, perfect. And then I'll hold it a little bit closer so you can see what I was talking about, being reluctant to do it a second stamping, because sometimes you can lose those beautiful second. So let me see if that's filming properly, giving good resolution. Between the S's there's a little gap in the R and the P and the X. There's like a little bit of white in the letters. And if I stamp it again, I risk the ink bleeding into that area and kind of covering over that. One stamping with VersaFine Clear, it does such a beautiful crisp job of the stamping that I'm reluctant to do it again. So I think we'll stop there. That's our two that are going to be the Polar Express one. And then we're going to swap that one out for this one, the candy canes. And I'm still going to stamp the candy cane one in black because I think with the reds around, we don't need to have, you may recall in one of the earlier ones I showed you, I stamped the candy cane in red, but I think on this occasion we're going to do it in black. So we're going to bring in our Where have I put them? I've got 2 left of these little cut tickets. And then we're just right on the edge there. And then we'll bring in our candy canes. Stamp and make sure that it sort of sits pretty central, top and bottom, left to right. I think it needs to come that way ever so slightly. I think that's about right. I'm going to pull it up on the door and then just check it from that angle. Yeah, I think that's good. That's pretty straight. So we're going to call that ready to go. Just feed that back into its little corner properly. Make sure that my magnet's far enough back. And then, yeah, this one's going to be in black. So there's still a little bit of, because I didn't use stamp cleaner, I just did it with a wet wipe. You can see there's still a little bit of red on there, but it's not going to interact with the black in any way, and it's just going to stamp beautifully in a moment. Then we'll bring our stamp tool, press tool, and lift that up. Hopefully one pass will do. Oh, that's the first one that's stuck completely, so we're going to have to pull that off carefully now. There we go. That looks fantastic. Okay, and then against the red and white, and I don't think we're going to have to do any fixing. Look, that just kind of, even with that little bit showing around the edges, it looks fine. We can pop it up on a bit of foam and that will reduce the eye being drawn to those little areas of kind of imperfection. I think that's going to look really cool. So that's that one done. One more to go. Thanks for your patience, folks. You're really bearing with me here. So last one with the black again. Bring back in our press tool. Hope that one pass is enough to preserve all of that beautiful detail and that really intricate sentiment stamp. Ha ha. I absolutely love these. I think this is one of my favourite sentiment stamp sets that Whimsy's brought out in a while. These ticket ones. The Halloween ones were amazing as well. I just adore them. I think that's so clever. And on the actual ticket frame like this, which is how they were designed to be used. Don't they look amazing? Amazing. So I'm really chuffed with that. So there you go. We've got 4 that are going to be on the candy stripes, and I will take my time mucking around getting them popped up on foam so that they all look right. And 2 with the Polar Express, 2 with the candy canes, and I think they look the business. So I showed you the earlier ones where I added little characters onto them. Here's our Santa one. I adore him. I think he is just the cutest. Forgive me that this is no longer in stock in Whimsy, the actual shape here, but I am sure many of you will have similar shapes in your stash, and my point today was to encourage you to look at what you have in your existing sets and use what you've got. Like that little shape there, who would have thought to use that necessarily as a ticket shape? That came from the Retro Mod die set. And I think that's such a cool ticket. You know, such a cool tag, I should say, not ticket. This is the ticket. The tag shape is just really clever. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. I hope I've given you some inspiration to go and look at your existing die stash with new eyes. Look at all your layering dies. Circles will work. Arches will work. Even these quirkier kind of shapes and frames will work as tags. So have a little bit of fun, be a little innovative, and use the stash you've got and enjoy making some Christmas tags with a bit of a twist. Thanks so much for stopping in today, and I wish you a beautiful Advent season.